I do know Mr. Camphausen. You guys look good. I don't generally see you on the other side of the camera lens, so this is a good thing. I have been so excited about the chapel theme that we have this year with Chosen. It's been such there's such meaning and purpose to being chosen by Christ, and all the different chapel speakers who just touch on different aspects of that. I want to tell a little bit today of the story that God has been growing in my life, kind of what He's done. Some stories just take a little bit to learn, and some take years. And so the story that I want to tell you about transparency is going to take, it's not going to take years to tell. It's going to take, but it took many years of my life. So I don't know if we can get the second slide there up. I think I'd be breaking the chapel code if I did not show at least one cute photo of the photo. So we can go to that second one. I tried to choose the cutest one because the second one, I should bring back the pigtails, huh? The second one is just approaching middle school, kind of the awkward, where I truly was able to pull off those glasses before they were even cool. But this is kind of the very beginning of that story of the work that God kind of did in my life in the past 10 years. That continued on to college, which is going to be the next slide. This is me. But if you see the background, that is not the background that I was in Photoshop for the win. If you see the second one, please leave it up. The second photo is me in my natural element, and that element is in the mountains. So that is my heart. Dropping that in Photoshop. This is the real one, the second one. There I go, it's working. And living life on the edge is something that really was true of my life, especially in high school. I think God had given me that mantra, living life on the edge, and changed it a little bit when I got to college. And in college, it was the mantra of only by His grace, probably because I lived life on the edge so much. And that really was true in my life, that I only graduated and only come to that point in my life because of His grace. During college, I was an art major, and this was kind of my identity and who I was. So much so, I was so entrenched in the art world that there was this one time where I had to dress up for Halloween, and I had never dressed up for Halloween before, probably for good reason at the end of it. But I wanted to be a woodland fairy, yes, because you can be a woodland fairy in college, and that's cool. In order to truly be a woodland fairy, I needed to bedazzle myself, and not only myself, but my face. And what better to adhere those bedazzling jewels to your face than with hot glue? Yeah. And I was the queen of hot glue, so I wore the marks on my face and those scars and those burns for about a semester, but it was a good reminder of just how much art can really take a lot from you. During the very end of my college career, I got away from hot glue, thankfully, and I went and I had to choose kind of a medium in order to go forward with. So a lot of my friends chose carpentry, they chose metalwork, they chose bronze, and I chose plastic. And not only plastic, but transparent plastic. And luckily, it wasn't transparent enough to be able to not get a grade. Luckily, there was at least some substance to it. But it was something that was really different. And it was also kind of encapsulating what God was teaching me in my life during that time. And I began just being absolutely fascinated with the idea of transparency. Kind of going off this quote from C.S. Lewis. The whole point of seeing something is to see something through it. And because of my Christian worldview, in a very secular environment in college, I began to try and display my faith through my art, through this idea of transparency, of Christ's light shining through me. And I went off this definition of transparency. In order for invisible matter to be made visible, it must go through the process of transparency in which light must first pass through in order to reveal the object behind. Light had to pass through. Christ's light passed through me before, in, and behind. And that was the work that God was doing in my life. This is some of the art that I created during that time. What I did is I took really trashed plastic plates and a heat gun, and I fused them together and distorted them until you couldn't see what they originally were, and then put them together in these really quite large sculptures. I would take, the colors that you see are knives and forks and spoons that are just so distorted when the heat touched that plastic that they no longer bear resemblance to their original nature. And it was an abstract expression of that transparency. I brought this transparency to photography. I took a darkroom and I took all these transparent objects that I could find. And when the light hit them, colored light hit them, they became something completely new and different. And this is part of my work to express, again, the work that God was doing in me. I began to be so fascinated about the analogy of transparency that I finally realized that the reason that it connected with my soul so much is that transparency is what we were created for. Transparency so often also has a form of weakness with it. When you think of any type of transparent substance, in order for something to be seen through it, it has to be delicate and fragile and pure. And that weakness, I think, was something that connected. We were created for transparency in order to be unveiled without hiding. In Paul's words, he says, "And we, who with unveiled faces all reflect the Lord's glory, are being transformed into his likeness with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord who is the Spirit." We are created to be raw without shame. In the words of Paul, "Those who look to him are radiant. Their faces are never covered in shame." Their faces are never covered in shame. We are created to be genuine without fear, because perfect love casts out fear. I want to share a story that has these three words: unveiled, raw, and genuine. Those three aspects of living a transparent life. So if we could go ahead and cue up this video. This is a story, my transparent story, where Christ's light was able to shine through me, and only by his grace do I have this specific story to tell.
This is my transparent story. Unveiled, raw, and genuine. A story sliced out by my Creator's chisel. My story started out just like the meaning of my name, the pure one. But little did I know that God had plans for the meaning of my middle name, Grace. Put it together and you have a story of pure grace. Purely dependent upon the grace of God to redeem my life that was so quickly broken from the start, before I even had a chance to fight. Before my life started, I carried the genes of a mental illness that had haunted generations of women in my family. A seed of this anxiety and despair would begin taking root in middle school and grow into a 10-year battle for my life. Years of a broken girl who was breaking herself and those she loved around her. It started with 2 years of countless hours of the night being spent rocking back and forth on my bed in blind terror, too terrified and embarrassed to call for help. This terror created a monster in high school and college who would shatter mirrors with flying fists, numb pain with too many pills, cringe at the sound of knocks on my locked doors, reject sleep for days on end, cut up my flesh, wander hopelessly in the dead of night, and even cause fearful loved ones to threaten calls to the police. But through all of these dark days, there was a girl who loved God with all her heart. With great darkness, there was also great light. For it is said, every flower, even the most beautiful, has its own shade beneath it as it basks in the sunlight. Where there is much light, there is also much shade. After years of fighting back this darkness, I began to feel my life slipping through my fingers. I cried out to God to save me with the core of everything I had, echoing the words of David. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and every day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look on me and answer, O Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. My enemy will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, for he has been good to me. Psalm 13. Every day, as my mind became weaker and weaker, God gave me the faith to declare that if this darkness was his will, I would glorify him as I walked this road to the end. This faith was all I had left, for the pain of living did not feel worth living at all. It was while walking down this road that God reached down and rescued me. Although I had faith that he could heal me in a moment, I never thought he would. But he is a God of surprises. One day, my family kneeled around me in our humble living room and asked for a miracle. In that moment, God chose to answer by rearranging my neuron pathways, and praise God, I never saw the light of that darkness again. Generations of darkness broken in a single moment. Today, by God's grace, he has chosen to make me transparent in the frailty of my trials, so that the rays of his glory may shine through, both in the darkness and in the light. Today, his grace protects me from shattering. And today, his grace lets me sparkle like a stained glass window on a sunlit day. But only by his grace. Only by his awe-inspiring grace.
That is God's story. That is the story that he created in my life. And I created that video because I cannot tell it without crying. Because when God works and he does something real in your life, it will always impact you for the rest of your life. This is a great story, but it is not the greatest miracle that I've ever experienced in my life. The greatest miracle that I have experienced and that I know more fully after being delivered from Christ, through Christ, is the miracle that he did on the cross. And that today is my miracle that is even greater than this. These trials did help me understand just what God does to rescue. But he has rescued us before he even rescued me from this trial. And I give him just all the glory for that. There are three things that we can do in order to be transparent, to have a transparent story. And the first is to be ready for trials. I think that every adult in the room will testify that it's not if, but when trials will come. And especially as Christians, we are not immune to the trials of this life. In fact, God tells us to expect it. In James, he says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. And perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking in anything." Not lacking in anything. And in being transparent, although that is your weakness, and it may seem like nothing, because its quality is pure and it's glass, we will not be lacking in anything at that day of time. Blessed is the man who perseveres under trials, because when he has stood the test, he'll receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. Whether that is on this earth or not, whether he delivers you on this earth, or whether he makes all things right on the other side of eternity. He chose for this trial in my life to make it right on this side of eternity. But he does not always work that way, but it does not mean that he is not good. The second thing is to reframe your trials as mercy and grace. There was a kind of a picture that God gave me just a few weeks ago, and was walking through the story of my life, the story of all of our lives, and seeing, it was an art gallery, and seeing all these paintings of different moments in my life, the good, the funny, the hard, and there were some picture frames that were a photograph of a black hole, like in a galaxy. And under that photo, that framed photo of this black hole, was the inscription, grace, or faith. Because that is what I learned during those times in my life that were simply a black hole. We do not know what is in a black hole in this world. But we do serve a God who on the other side of eternity will make all things right. And with our heavenly minds, be able to reframe what we think of that. I understand that there are some things in this world that are so dark that we can never, with our own human eyes, see the light of God in them. But I have learned to be thankful for those things, even if I do not understand. Because I know that I have faith that God will make all things right, even if it's not in this world and in this eternity, in this temporary. The other thing is to be raw and real. None of us have it all together. And if you think you have it together, then you don't have it all together. But we do know the one who has it all together. There is a trial that each one of us is going through. And if you think that you are the only one who is going through something, then you are not. That is one of the greatest lies of the enemy, is that we are alone. He spoke that to me more often than I can count, that I was alone. And he will make you feel alone, but you are not alone. And in fact, if we share, be transparent in our sharing of things, the stories, the transparent stories that God has given us to share, I promise you that it will connect with somebody. And that we are robbing them of the joy of sharing it with us, or the wisdom that they could possibly get through by seeing us go through this trial if we do not share it. But I do want to encourage you to be a good steward of your story. You are a steward of the story that God is giving you. And you need to be wise with who you share it with. Because I promise that he will give a platform for you someday with whatever trials that he's creating in your life. And that platform will be worth it in that way. But for right now, whether he's giving you that platform or he'll have it for you later, be wise with those that you can trust and who you can share. Because I promise you that God will use it. He is a God who redeems. One other thing that I just want to share is that the only cure for shame, is authenticity. And I feel like I know that God has great plans for bringing us a spirit of authenticity, of being real. As I was studying where transparency reveals itself in the Bible, in Greek, the word for transparency is in Revelations. And it's the word hulos. Let me go ahead and read this to you because I thought it was absolutely fascinating. Hulos, the Greek word for transparency, is found in the book of Revelation when describing the sea of glass that surrounds the throne of God, which reflects the Lord himself and is manifested or reflected by the saints who surround him amid the sea of glass, and join in the cry, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty." This reflects the glory he invested in them as transformed or transparent saints. In this way, the Lord gets all the glory, and the believers have the incredible privilege of sharing or reflecting it. This word for transparency is that sea of glass. That sea of glass is in the throne room of Christ, which we are in. And at that moment, I really truly believe that we will be transparent in the fullest sense of the word, because we are simply vessels that are reflecting God's grace. And I love that appears in Revelations in that word. I don't have a time. Mr. Pianos, can we go ahead and wrap it up? Okay. If you could go ahead and pray with me, we'll go ahead and close this time. Lord, I thank you that you have chosen to make us transparent and that you still have a work to do in our lives. Lord, I thank you for the frailties of our trials. And I thank you that you have promised to have rays of your glory that may shine through that, so both in the dark moments and in the light moments. Lord, I pray that you would become greater and that we would become less in this process of transparency. That we would ultimately become nothing to ourselves so that you may in every way glorify yourself by making us a genuine reflection of your grace. In your name, amen.